Hello everyone. We're going to jump right in at chapter 4. Abby and Ben meet the horses. Bernie and Al were away from the station all day. By then, his customers knew they were off getting horses. Marion and the 2 grandchildren knew it too. In a small town, word gets around. Abby was 10, her brother Ben was 8. They were fair, round-faced kids with big white teeth their faces hadn't grown into yet. Abby was tall. She stood straight so she looked older than her years. She had a blaze of gold hair. Ben was sturdy. His hair was darker, buzz cut. Until the horses came, the kids were solemn. They lived with Bernie and Marion. Their mother was dead. They didn't know who their father was. The morning after the horses arrived, Bernie went out to his truck at 5 o'clock to go feed them. Abby and Ben were sitting in it, waiting. They said they'd help. The horses were prancing around the paddock with tails flying when the truck reached the top of the hill. The kids were as excited as the horses. Everybody was smiling. Inside the barn, it smelled of fresh hay and horse. That afternoon, Bernie bought brushes and curry combs at the Agway and a stepladder so the kids could do the horses' backs. After a couple of days, the horses began to smell like the children, and the children began to smell like the horses. Abby and Ben rode over with Bernie every morning at 5 to help muck, feed, and water. Before the horses arrived, it was hard to get the kids up for the school bus at 7. Now, they had friends who needed them. Sometimes when the kids doled out the sticky grain with molasses and vitamins, the horses would nuzzle and lick them, probably for salt, but maybe for love. There is nothing softer or more delicate than a horse's muzzle. Sometimes, if Bernie was standing close by, they'd nuzzle him too. "Go on," he'd mutter as he pushed them off, but it made him smile. His years fell away when he smiled. You could see the boy he'd been. And here we have a picture of Bernie. You can see that. Chapter 5. The lady tells the barn about Whittington. As soon as Bernie drove away, the rats would rush from their holes, chittering and squealing to chase the lady and the chickens from the grain. They made off with all the bantam eggs they could find. One night, they cornered the deckled grain, killed him for the food in his craw, tore him open, and left him in a mess of blood and feathers. The lady had nightmares that she'd be next because her wings were clipped and she moved slow. There were rat holes in the barn walls and tunnels in the back part where it was dark. The morning she met the cat, as soon as she finished her bath, the lady went and told the other animals about Whittington. She didn't giggle about his name or mention his old one. She'd heard enough of his story to understand why he'd given it up. The bantams chirred and scolded at the idea of a cat moving in. "Cats eat birds," the oldest one said. "We have enough problems with the rats." Coraggio was opposed too. "No more predators," he declared. There was an approving murmur from the bantams. The horses didn't pay much attention. They'd known cats before, never had much to do with them. The rats crept out to listen. They didn't have a vote, but they held with the horses until the lady spoke again. "Whittington says he's a ratter." "I don't know, but that's what he says. He looks like a ratter." "We could use a ratter," she added, glaring in the direction of the rats. There was an "ooh" of approval from the fowl. The lady reminded the horses how close they'd come to ending up dog food. It was the same with the rooster and the bantams. They'd been remnants at a livestock auction. The auctioneer had announced that if no one took them, he'd wring their necks. He wasn't going to interrupt his weekend on their account. So somebody bid $1, borrowed a crate, and left them at Bernie's. Bernie had a reputation. You could tell from his smile and the way he walked he was likelier to say yes than no to a crate of tired chickens. The barn hummed with talk about the cat. Not the moving in part. They couldn't stop him from doing that. The family part. You can't get rid of somebody once he's in your family. Whatever happens, you're responsible. But who could say who belonged in or out of that family? What clinched it for Whittington was Ben and Abby looking around the barn at 5 the next morning and asking in unison, "Where's the cat?" Bernie looked up. "What cat?" I've got a photo of the horses as well, or a drawing, not a photo. So they're holding kind of a congress there to discuss the important decision of Whittington moving in. Chapter 6. The animals tell Whittington about themselves. Whittington was waiting under the hedge. It was ticking snow, much like today. He stepped out when he saw the lady. "Okay," she said, "we'll go down together. I'll introduce you." When they arrived, it was snug in the barn, pungent with damp dung and hay. The bantams murmured and cackled together like they were telling jokes. Now and then Coraggio crowed. He always startled folks when he crowed because they never knew when he'd do it, and he didn't either. The lady and Whittington sat close in the hay, talking about themselves and the news about Bernie's selling out. Every winter, Bernie talked about selling out because he had arthritis in his knee. The cold weather made it hurt. It was more and more painful for him to climb up and down the hill when it was too icy for the truck. The animals were all worried about moving. Talk about moving is like talk about divorce. Nobody knows what it will mean, except that everything will be different and not necessarily better. Who but Bernie would shelter and feed 2 old horses and an assortment of odd birds? As the snow thickened, the lady told Whittington her story. She'd been one of 12 ducklings that Bernie got one Easter. A stranger had showed up at the Texaco with a crate of ducks. He said he was going to drop them in the trash if Bernie didn't take them. The fox had made off with a couple of the lady's brothers right away. The hawk took one, the rats took a toll, so did the raccoon and some coyotes. She was the only duck left. Aramis and little Spooker were racehorses, the lady explained as if they weren't standing there. Aramis is a gelding. He was fast, but Spooker won purses. Aramis never finished in the money. Spooker won't let him forget it. "What's a gelding?" the cat wanted to know. "It's an operation they do to manage male horses. Otherwise, he'd be wild." Aramis looked away. Because she won money, Spooker goes first for everything around here. The hay goes down, Spooker gets the first bite. Water in the bucket, her muzzle is right in there sucking it down. It's the same when Bernie or one of the kids tosses out the grain and cracked corn with molasses. Spooker gets the first. Bernie puts down grain for me and the other birds. We have to hurry to eat it, though. The rats hassle us. They're aggressive. Norways, they call themselves. But what they have to do with Norway, I don't know. Brown rat is a good enough name for them. Despite the Moscow in my name, my ancestors were English, she continued, swelling up some, the way people do who have ties to Great Britain. There's a college in England where they honor my line by marching around behind a duck held aloft on a pole. It has to do with the wings of knowledge. At this point, the lady gave a great flap to show the wings of knowledge. Her wings went out as far as you could stretch your arms. Coraggio roused himself and flapped too. He was a Plymouth Rock, white with a red crown. He sang all day on the dung heap, but kept himself as clean as the president in his white starched shirt. "I got my name because of my bravery," he said. "It was the night of the raccoon. She slipped in looking for eggs. She came after me, thought it was a hen. I drove her off. When Bernie came in the morning and saw the feathers, he figured what had happened. He said I had courage. I took it from there. Our family is descended from the wild red jungle fowl," he continued. "In science, we're called Gallus gallus. We are the most important bird in the world. Wherever men go, we go too because of our eggs. Men have kept us by them for 4,000 years. He didn't mention drumsticks. There was a ruckus among the bantams. Coraggio ahemed because of their eggs, but I keep things going. Some of them can do an egg every other day." The cat looked around for an egg. "There aren't any right now," said the senior bantam. Oh, oops, that wasn't a good voice. "There aren't any right now," said the senior bantam. "We're too busy keeping warm. Wait until there's more sun." The lady turned to the horses. "Your turn." Spooker said that she and Aramis were Arabians. Their ancestors had been brought here when America was a new world. "The Spaniards brought us in their ships because we're the fastest ones. Other breeds can pull heavier loads, but we're the fastest. In the westerns, they ride Arabians like us. We're professionals. A big woman raised and trained us on dirt roads in the mountains in Vermont. She taught us to pull a sulky, a bare-frame cart with 2 wheels and a seat. The races were on level ground. Our drivers wore bright silks and helmets. They were all skinny, easy to pull. They carried whips to snap for signals, not to hit us. You don't run a whole race flat out. There's strategy in racing. That's what I mean about our being professionals. We knew to follow the signals. We raced around a track with grandstands where people stood cheering. The cheering always made us speed up. I won purses, prize money. Aramis made a loud noise that wasn't a sneeze. He didn't like being reminded that he'd never finished in the money. There were more horses around before there were cars and trucks, he said. 100 years ago, even old horses like us were everything on a farm. Truck, tractor, transportation. Horses don't have work like that anymore. We're pets. We're helping Bernie raise his grandkids. Whittington just listened. He could have mentioned that the word cat is found in various languages, as far back as they can be traced. The one-eyed rat they called the Old One stayed quiet too. For his part, he could have told an interesting tale about his ancestors arriving at Jamestown with Captain John Smith, and long before that, rats coming to Europe from China and the plague they carried. Men bring rats along wherever they go.